Hello and welcome to today's European SharePoint Office 365 and Azure Community webinar. My name is Orla and I'm delighted to be joined by Nikki Chappell from Cloudways UK, who will be talking to you today about how to create a simple team creation workflow using Power Automate. Remember to join in the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC22. Don't forget to check out the Resource Centre. This is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com and click the content link at the top. Microsoft Teams Week is kindly sponsored by Mind Manager. Mind Manager provides visual productivity tools and mind mapping software to take you and your organization to where you want to be. Find out more at mindmanager.com. Continue your Teams learning by joining us for our next webinar, Power Platform for Teams, Welcome to Microsoft Dataverse. That is tomorrow between 11 and 12 CEST with Marco Rocca from Microsoft. Our ESPC22 early bird sale is now on. Save €200 on 3- and 4-day tickets. Find out more at sharepointeurope.com, but hurry as this sale ends on the 29th of September. Why should you attend ESPC22? Watch the video on our homepage to hear pre-event insights from Jeff Teeper, President of Collaborative Apps and Platforms at Microsoft. Check it out now at sharepointeurope.com. After the webinar, we will have a questions and answers session. Type any question you have in the questions window. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Centre, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to pass you over to our presenter, Nikki. Hello, Nikki.
Hello, thank you very much for having me today. So as mentioned, I am Nikki Chappell. I'm a Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a demonstration of how to create a Teams creation process using Power Automate, the tools that you already have in Microsoft 365. So this is going to be a demonstration. We're going to try and build it live, get it all working. Don't worry if you can't follow along with everything. I have written a blog that goes along with this, so you will be able to refer to that afterwards. Okay, let's move over. So just a little bit about me. So I'm the Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway. I focus
Nikki,
on...
just a moment. We don't see your slides. Just are you sharing? I'll just take back control for a second and pass it over to you again, and you should get a message up to share your screen there. Okay, passing over to you now, so you should get a little message up there. Yes, can see your bio now. Great, thanks, Nikki.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm Nikki Chappell. I'm the Principal Cloud Architect at Cloudway. I specialise in Microsoft 365 and Teams governance and compliance. So it's really balancing that need between productivity and security and really maximising the products that you get within Microsoft 365. I'm also a Microsoft MVP and have a number of Microsoft certifications. If you want to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, I've got my own website, and that's where you'll find this blog. And I've also got a podcast, all things M365 compliance. So I've got the links on the screen there. So today's session is all about a Teams creation process. So the first question I'm always asked is, well, why do I need a Teams creation process? You know, you've got it there. I can go into my bottom of my Teams app and create a team. So why do we need to go and put additional work on it? And there's 4 things really why you need to do this. The first one is naming standard. You can create duplicate team names when you create teams, either as a user from the Teams application or even from the Teams admin portal. There's no check on the display name. So I could create a team called marketing, and I could be the head of marketing in the UK. And there could be my colleague who's the head of marketing in the US, also goes in and creates a team called marketing. Now that could cause obviously duplicate team names, but it causes problems whereby people might be putting the wrong information in the wrong team. So that's kind of one of the problems. So that's the limited kind of display of naming standards. So with the naming standards, you can have the option to put a prefix or a suffix after the name. So, but that's only based on the user's profile. So the person who's creating the team. That information may not be information you want. So for example, you don't know whether that team's an operational team or maybe a project-based team, or what department it's in. The third thing really why we need another process is teams only ask you for one owner. So when you create a team as a user, you are the owner. However, there could be situations whereby that owner leaves the organisation and their account is removed. When the account is removed, the team becomes ownerless. Now, if that's a private team, the team owner was the person that it decided who was going to come into that team. They were the gatekeeper for people joining. So you get to this state where people can't join the team. So it's always best practice to have more than one owner. And the last thing is really an approval step. So with kind of Teams creation, you either have it relatively open and people can go into their Teams app and create teams, so really without any governance, or you can lock it down, maybe so only admins do it. But then that puts a burden on your IT resources. So really you want something maybe in the middle that people can request a team, but then you go through some sort of governance process to make sure that there's no duplicates, various other things like that, and make sure they've got multiple owners. So that is why we are going through a process today to show you how you can do that using Power Automate. Well, it's a little bit more than Power Automate. We're going to make use of Microsoft Forms. So that's going to be how we create the information. That's what people are going to fill in. We're going to use Microsoft Lists. We're going to store all the information that comes in from the forms. So you've got sort of an audit record. So if you want to review your teams later on and say, why was that team created? You've got a record of that. And then we're going to use Power Automate to automate our processes and generate those teams. A couple of things to consider. When we're creating this process, we want the Power Automate system, our process, to be creating teams. Thereby, we need to make sure we restrict team creation. We don't want users to be able to bypass this process and still go into the Teams app and be able to create a team. So that can be done via PowerShell. You restrict it down to a group of users. Now, you need to make sure that the service account that you're going to use for Power Automate is one of those people that are allowed to create teams. That's really important. And I say use a service account rather than a user account. If you use a user account, for example, if it's my account and I leave the organisation, that flow will stop working because my account is closed and therefore your process is broken. So that's why it's always recommended to have a service account running there so it's not related to an individual person. And importantly, what I'm showing you is standard Power Automate. You don't need to buy any premium licenses to do this. So this should be available to everyone. And lastly, before we go into the demo, I'm just going to go through how I've chosen to create my naming standards for my teams. So what will happen is someone will select their team name. So they'll request a team name. They also request what type of team it is. And for my process, I've done a operational and a project-based team. We're going to take a code of that, a bit shorter, either op or project. That's going to go in front of the team name, and then we're going to put the requester's country, that's pulled from Azure AD, pull that together to make the team name. So that's kind of our process. Obviously, you can create whatever you like. So now let's quickly go through and actually look at the demo of this. Okay, so what we have to start off with is a form. So I'm used to using Microsoft Forms for this. You could use Power Automate. And what you've got here is I'm creating the team name. I'm creating a description. Both of those are needed when you create a standard team. I'm using sensitivity labels to control whether guests have got access to my team or not. So I need to know whether they want an internal team or guests. You've got a team type. So this is where I'm collecting information, metadata that I'm going to put at the beginning of my team name. op for operational team, and proj for project-based team. I just want to correct the duration, so I might need to know it's a project, and I think the project's going to be 6 months or a year. It means that you can review these things later on and actually go back to the project manager and say, do you still need the team? Can we tidy it up? Can we delete it? I'm asking for a second owner, and I'm asking for some justification. Again, you might want some information. I'm collecting that information that's going to go off to an approver. Secondly, I create a list, and this is just a SharePoint list. I'm storing the form in the list in a team site that the approvers can have a look at. It's capturing all the information from the form, but it's capturing a little bit more information. So that was the team name that was requested, ABC. The person requested an operational team. So I've just done some checks to say if operational, op, else, proj, and then I've concatenated it all here. So I can quickly show what that looks like. I go here, I need to go up here, sorry. In the list settings, if we look at final to name. So this is a calculated column. So what it says is I want my final team name to be the team type code plus it's the and, then I've got a dash. I want the title, and then I say and I want another dash, and then I'm putting the requester's country. So I'm just appending 3 bits and pieces together. So that's the kind of power that you can have on list. You can have these calculated columns as well. So it's quite useful. So that is that you need to kind of get set up. So you create a column for each of your fields in your list, plus the calculated columns as well, so you can derive this final team name. So let's go and build a flow. So what we want to do is we want to create a automated flow. I'm just going to call it create a team demo, and my trigger is when a form has been submitted. So when somebody fills a form in, I want this to be triggered. So the first thing we need to do is select my form. So here we are, request a team. Then once that has been submitted, I want to get all the information from it. So I'll need to do get response details. So I say get all the information, all of that information that people put in. So I select my form, and then I need to select the ID. So from there. So that now will bring all the variables in that I need. Next, we're going to create some variables and get some information about the users. So the first thing I want to do is I want to get the profile of the person creating the flow. So I want to get my profile. So this will be the information from the service account. The reason why we need to have this is, but by default, when the team is created, the flow owner, in this case, the service account, is added as an owner of the team. So that might not be appropriate. So I'm just capturing the detail now. So I've got a step later on that will remove them as owner of the team. Then we want to find out some information about the person who submitted the form. So that's get user profile. And what we want to do is we want to find out the requester. So if we scroll through all of this information until we get to the form, it should be requester's email. So that's going to get all of their profile, and we need that so we can get their information about what country they are in. We create another get user step, get user profile, and this time we want to get the information about that second owner. So we can just quickly speed things up by typing in second to try and filter down the list, that's rather than scroll through. So what we've now got is we've got the profile of the account that's running the flow, we've got the profile of the person who requested the new team, and we've got the profile information of that second owner. Next, we're going to create some variables. Let me just type in variable. And what we want is the initialized variable. So these are the variables that we will use later on. So what I want is a variable, and I'm going to call it var approvers. I tend to put var in front of it just so I know that they're variables, and it's going to be a type string. This is going to hold a list of the approvers' email addresses later on that is going to be split by semicolons. So we're going to create that with a blank. We want to create another variable. We're going to create several variables now. In an initialized variable. This time, we're going to say we want a variable for the approvers team. It's type of string. Now, what this is going to be a team, the team ID, the group, Microsoft 365 group ID. So rather than saying for the approvers, I want person A, B, and C, and hard coding that in the Power Automate flow, what I'm saying is get the list of a particular membership of a team. So the team that I'm using is, if I go through to here into my teams, and I've got a team called Create a Team Demo. So it's the members of this team are going to be the owners. So what you can do without any code is if you go into your team and you say get link to team. So I can copy that out. Now, if I go back to my flow, I'll paste everything in here so you can see. You get a big, long string. So what you're getting here is if you look through here, group ID equals, and then you see this string here until you get to and tenant ID. So you don't want anything after and tenant ID, and you don't want anything before group ID. So now that's a really quick way to get your group ID, which is your team ID, so we can do some approval flow. We can find out the members of this team. Next one we want to do is we're going to create a variable for the sensitivity labels. Initialize a variable. And this is again a type of string. So that's going to be, is this a team that allows internal people or is it guests? And what I'll need to do is I'll need to store the GUID of the team, of the sensitivity label in here, not the display name. So that's what that's going to be used like. And the last one I'm going to create for the minutes is we're going to create a variable which is just going to hold the link to the Microsoft form I'm using. We use that when there's a scenario of we find it's a duplicate team name, and we're just going to send a response back to the user to say this is a duplicate name, please fill the form in again, and just share the link to the form. So we've got some variables set up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to create an item in the SharePoint list. So we want to create an item. What we want to do is say, where is this SharePoint list? So mine's in my Create the Team demo, and I've got Create a Team list. And then what we'll do is we will map information across. So for example, title is going to be a team name. Sensitivity is the team sensitivity. We found that there. The team type. Let's type in type. The second owner is, now this is where we need to find the user principal name for that second owner. So we'll go down and we'll find, no, we'll find it that way. User principal name, and we want it, I should have labeled them. There's one problem when you're speeding through and I haven't labeled the information, so let's rename that. Second owner. Okay, so I want the second owner. So here we go. So that's the importance of when you're using these steps. Try to label them with a good name. Otherwise, as you saw here, I came through and there was 3 options and you could quite easily pick the wrong one. Now I've actually labeled them. You can see I want the one for the second owner then. The duration, so yeah, the duration we can't actually map to duration. I'll just I'll just come back to that one in a second. Just done something wrong, sorry. Description, justification, requester. So we need to find the user principal name. We want the country, because that's what we're going to append at the end. So if we want to find the requester, we'll just scroll through and we want the country. So that's pulling the country of the requester. We don't want the approval status quite yet. So what we need to do, if I quickly go back here to the duration, when you do the date picker on the form, it's not in the right date format to put it into a date field with a SharePoint list. You need to write an expression. So we've got an expression here. So we want to format the date time of, then we're going to select the dynamic content, then we can find the date field. So if I scroll down, it's going to be on the form, and we had one of duration. So that's saying format that into the correct format so you can use the date and time in the list. So that's all the information that you've got to start off with. The approval status will populate later on. So next we're going to create a few more variables now. We're going to create a variable for the domain. And nothing's happening. Oh, just done increment rather than initialize. So initialize, here we go. So we'll initialize the domain. So what we've got here is it's a string, and this is the beginning of my website. So it's the standard string before. So this is my website up to either sites or it could be Teams. Then we're going to create another variable, and this is going to hold my team name, but it's going to remove any spaces from it, because with a URL, you don't have spaces in it. And what we're going to do is we're going to create what we think is going to be the SharePoint site URL for your new team, and we're going to say, does that already exist or not? So that's what we're going to look at. And that's of a type string. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do a replace. So we do a replace. And then what we want to look at is in the dynamic content, we want the team name. Move across, and then we're going to then take spaces. So we do comma and then single quote, space, single quote. So that's say take anything where there's a space, and I want to replace it with, and then we just do 2 quotes together. So what's it saying is anywhere in that string where you've got a space, replace it with not a space. So that removes things here. And then what we've got then is we create another variable. So this is going to provide my dummy SharePoint URL. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 2 variables. We want the site domain and we want the team name minus any spaces. So that's what we're going to use to look up. And 1 more variable. And we just want a Boolean variable. This time we're going to have something just to say, does the team name exist? So we need it as a Boolean. So we've got a yes, no. So now we want to look up that made up SharePoint name of that beginning of the domain name and the team name minus the spaces. So how can we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use, I'm choosing to use get lists. And then I want to put my site address. So where am I going to look up? I want to look up in this particular SharePoint site. Well, I'm going to use my new SharePoint site, the one that I've just created, or I've put together, this var new team URL. And I'm going to look up lists in there. And what that will do is that's going to look up to say, have I got any lists in there? And you're going to get 3 responses back. One is a 200, which says, yes, there's a list there and you've got access. Then you get a code that says a 403, which means the SharePoint site exists, but you don't have access to it. And then you've got a 404, which means the URL doesn't exist. And that's the one we're looking for. A 404 means if the SharePoint site URL doesn't exist, it's like to be a unique name that we can use for our team. So what we do next is we create a compose step after here. And what we want to try and get at is the status code here. So what we need to do first is we need to select the 3 dots and we need to configure run after. We need to say has failed, because normally with a flow, if you get an error message like this SharePoint site doesn't exist or this name doesn't exist, the flow will just stop working. Well, actually we want the flow to continue. So we want to make sure it shows there as success. You'll get this little thing here. And then what I want to look at, I hope I can find it, not there. Ah, right, bear with me a minute. It's not there. It should be there. Sorry about this. Just leave that for a second. Let's save that flow. So we're running after, make sure it's ticked failed, and we should be able to find the status. For some reason it's not there. Okay, so bear with me a second. Right, what I'll need to do is I'll have to, I think, swap over to one that is working for the time being, just to show you what it should look like. Because what you should get out is a status code coming up here. So just bear with me and I will find out why that didn't happen. I might have to derive that, so I just need to find out how I did that before. Right, okay, I just found it. So what I need to do is I need to do an expression. I need to do outputs, open bracket. Then you need to find your get underscore lists, single score, close bracket, square bracket, single quote, status code, square bracket. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we've derived that there. So that step is actually shown on the web page that I've got. So, there. So now what we've got is we've got the output of that list. What is the status code? Does the SharePoint site exist and we've got access to 100? Does it exist but we don't have access 403, or does it not exist? So what we're going to do is we're going to use a switch step to actually set a variable to say, does it exist or not? So we want to use that compose step. So that was the output of that. Output of your compose step. So we said if it equals 200, then what we want to do, we want to set the variable var team URL exists, and then we say yes, it does exist. So expression, because it's a Boolean, so we want to put true in that one. We want to do 403, add an action. Then we can say set variable. And then we've got team exists, expression true. And then we do another one, 404. So 404 is that the site URL doesn't exist. So we do another set variable. And this time we're saying, does it exist? No, it doesn't exist. So we're going to set it as false. Then what we're going to do, we're going to say if it's false, send a message back to that user to say the name exists. So we're going to do a condition. If that var team URL exists is equal to expression false, then we want to, if it equals false, we'll continue. If it equals true, it's a duplicate. So what we're going to do there, we're going to update the list to say it's a duplicate. Going to update the item in the list. So what we see here is we need to get your location. So it's under the create the team demo. The list was create a team list, and the ID was the ID we were working with earlier. And all we're going to go down to here is going to look at the further down, approval status, and we're going to say it's a duplicate. So we can put there it's a duplicate. And we can have comments. We might want something like the site already exists. We might want to put, say, rejected, something like that in there. So rejected is a duplicate. And then we might want to say, well, what was the date? When did this happen? So for this, I'm just going to say the submission time when the form was submitted. Let's look up submission time. That's there. So that's all we're going to do there. And then we're just going to post a message back to that user to let them know it's a duplicate name. So I'm just using Teams chat, post a message. We want to post a message to a chat or channel. I'm just choosing the Flowbot. We want to chat with Flowbot. We then want to say, who do we want to send this message to? Well, we're going to send a message to the person who submitted that form. So that's the requester. So that's going to be the user principal name of the person who responded on the form. And then we're just going to have some message. So I've just put in here the team name, and then I'll put the final team name here, already exists, please try another name. And I've just put a link back to that form. So that's what's going to happen there. Save this, make sure this is all saving here. So if the team name doesn't exist, that SharePoint site doesn't exist, well, we can go away now, and what we're going to do is create an approval process on here. So what we'll do is we will, first of all, we need to get the list of the people in the groups. I get this group. So it's a group action rather than a team action, and we want to list group members. We selected a group at the beginning of the team ID, so we can just put that in. I missed a step out. So we want to find the team name that we stored, var approvers team. So that was the team. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go through each of those members and we're going to append them to a list. So all the strings. So what we want to have is an append to string variable. And there'll be one here, append to string variable. So we're going to go through for each member of the team, we're going to append it to this variable, their email address followed by a semicolon. So it's var approvers is the name we want. And we want to say, we want to find here we go. We want the user principal name, and that's automatically put the apply to each. Now, importantly, put a semicolon afterwards. So it's very much like when you've got an email and you send an email to a group of people, you have those semicolons in between. So that's going to give us the list of the approvers. Then what we're going to do is start that approval process. So using the standard approvals process, we're going to say start and wait for an approval. The approval type, we've got several of them. We want an approve or reject, and we only want the first person to respond. We don't need everybody in that team to respond. So I'm going to say first to respond. It's going to have some more. So we've got the title, new team request for this particular team name, the people that are going to approve it, that's this variable that we've created, so that's going to be the bar approvers. And the details, you can put whatever information you like in here. It's just going to be the text that those approvers are going to see. So I've said team name, final team name, the description and the sensitivity. You could put more information from the form, and that's the information that's going to go off to the approvers. And then we want to see what happens when it responds. What I'll do is I'll just quickly save this and we'll just try it and we'll just see where we get to from here. So how it would work is you would have a form and you would have your team name, test, description here. We say we'll have it internal, we want an operational team, duration, we'll just pick any duration. Second owner, so I have a list here of a second owner. And the email address. I'm going to put Adele in as a second owner, and I've just put justification text. So that would be submitted. So what it will do is the flow will run, and then it would check to see whether the team name exists. So I should really test it out. I should have done test first. Test. That's the flow being tested, so it's running. So we'll just quickly go through and check that this works. Right, while that is just taking its time, or just to carry on, I'm just mindful of time. Okay, so I've got a notification. Notification has come through to say, here's my team, do I want to approve it, yes or no? So that's the type of information you can pass. So that would then send a response back, and it said it's finalized. So hopefully, go back to here. So what we'll do now is we need to check to see whether the response was a true or false response. Was it approved, yes or no? So we're going to create an action, a condition. Was the outcome of the approval, is it equal to approved? Was it approved? Say, yes, it was approved. So what do we need to do now? Well, we need to create a team. We're actually getting to the point of team creation now. So we create a team. And what we're going to do, that's going to be the final team name, so the one where we've put the information together. The description is going to be the description that was entered. And that's it. That will create a team and the flow owner will be the owner of this team. We're not adding any members at this point. That's all that's happening. Then what we want to do is we need to update the list to say the team's been created, it's been approved, and this is the team ID. So what we want to do is we want to update an item. And create a team demo. Request a list. That's the ID. And what we need to do, we just need to go down to the bottom here, and we want to do approval status. That's going to be outcome of the approval. We might want the approval comments. So there's various things that we can take from here as well. So it wasn't approval, it was responses, a summary of the responses. So also here what we can do is we can put the new team ID. So if we look at team, we'll get a team ID come out. Now, importantly, what we'll do next is we need to add in a delay. So it takes a little bit of a time for that team and the group behind the team to be created. If we carry on the flow as is, it will just time out and it will fail because it will say, I don't recognize the team ID. So I normally put something like 2 minutes. You might need a little bit more. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check which sensitivity label is being what was selected. So I'm going to use a switch for that. And I'm going to choose the sensitivity label that was in here. That's right. Just find it. On the create item, there we go, sensitivity. So if the sensitivity equals, we had 2 sensitivity labels they could choose from in that form. If we look back at the form, I had internal and guests. So what I need to do now is I need to map the display name of your sensitivity label to your GUID. So you're going to need SharePoint to access that. So you can, so not SharePoint, PowerShell. So I'll just quickly zoom in. So this is what you'll need to do to actually get that. You need get label and then you format the name. So if I just quickly run this. So it's going to, you need to run on the Exchange online and then go to the security and compliance module. It will take a little while to go in. I've already logged in, so I didn't need my credentials again. And I'm just saying get label, and it's going to come out in a table. The display name is what we've seen, that internal and guests, and then we will get out the GUID. So guests and internal. So we copy those out. So that's what we're using in our flow. What we'll do now is we'll create those variables. So we'll set the variables, and it was going to be var sensitivity label. So we want set label sensitivity label, and that is going to equal this and then this one. This one equals here. So what we're doing here is, depending on that person's picked internal, external, we're going to do the sensitivity label. Then what we do is we then have to add that sensitivity label to the group. So what we're going to do, we're going to use an HTTP to an Office 365 group, send an HTTP request. So what this is going to use, it's going to use a little bit of Graph API. You can get this with your standard licenses, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the Graph, Microsoft Graph, says look up the groups, look up this group with my new team ID. And what we're doing is patching, we're updating it. We're saying we've got this group, now I want you to add the appropriate sensitivity label. So we've got some JSON, again, this will be in blog. So you've got the JSON there that you can add in. Then, so that'll add your sensitivity label, either the internal or the guest one, or whatever labels you've got. So a switch can have multiple entries, so you could have 3 or 4 labels there. Then we're going to add some members to the team. So actually we want to add the requester, and we want to add that second owner as team owner. So what we're going to do is have to do add a member to a team. So we want to select the new, oops, no, I don't want to do that. We want the team ID of your new team. And then we say, who are we going to add? So we want the user principal name or the person who filled in the form. Importantly, go to these advanced options. Should the person be an owner? Yes. We'll do the second one of these. You can only add one person at a time. So we do the same step again. Add a member to a team. New team ID. And then this time we want the user principal name of the second owner. So that's now added those 2 people as owners of the team. The last step on here, I'm mindful of the time, should just have enough time. I said at the beginning, when the flow owner is automatically added as that team owner, well, in most of the situations, you don't want that. So let's go and remove that flow owner, unless they are either the requester, they requested the team themselves, or they were added as a second owner. So we can do that with a condition. So let's do a condition. We want to say, does the user principal name of my profile, so that's the flow owner, does that equal either the user principal name of the responder, we'll make sure or does the user principal name of the flow owner equal to the user principal name of the second owner. So if it's either one of those, then the flow finishes, because they should genuinely be an owner of the team. So we're saying the flow owner is either the responder, the person who filled the form in, or the flow owner is the second owner. They should be in the team. If they're not, all we can do is we can just remove them from the team. So what we'll need to do here is, it's a 2-step approach. We need to remove them as owner and then remove them as a member. So what we'll do is, first of all, we've actually got to use another one of those HTTP to the Office 365 group. And let's copy that out from here. So what this is going, it's Microsoft Graph Groups, your new team name, owners, and the owner ID equals the ID of Get My Profile. So that was the flow owner. We're saying we want to find them. This time we want to delete, we want to remove them from the team. So that removes them as the owner. And there's another step to remove them as a member. Remove as let's have a look. There should be a remove. Oh, it's removed from group. That's why I can't find it under Teams. Yeah, anything to do with people when you're working with Teams, actually the Microsoft 365 underlying group. So let's look. Remove member from group. And then we want to do the new team ID. And then we want to find the user principal name of my profile. And that should be the process. So what I'm going to quickly do is I'm actually, just in case there is something with this, but I'm going to quickly come over to here. This is one that I created earlier and I know that worked. So let me get out of this and make sure it's on. Let's turn it on. So now let's what happens. So we're going to create a team. We're going to call this Nikki1. I'll call it Nikki team and put my description in. I want it internal, operational. I'll pick a date. I want it till the end of the year. I want to add Adele as a second owner. And then which was no spaces. And I'll put some text in there. So that has gone through. So the flow will start. So what happens now is I will get a request that will come through to say, do you want to approve this? So I want to approve that. So that will go through. So what we could now see while this is waiting, we've got it's been approved. And had that person who did the request, they would have got that. So if Adele had sent it in, or Deborah or something like that. So what's going to happen now is that information that I've put on the form is being added to my SharePoint list. So there was the name of the team. That was the name of the requester, so I'm in as the MOD admin. My country is showing in my Azure AD profile as GB, and we said it was an operational team. So what happens is the operational team, we say, well, actually, operational is too long a word to have in the front. I want to put a code, OP, in front of it, and my naming standard is the team type, code, team name, and then the country of the person who requested it. So it comes out as OP. Let's put zoom in a bit here. OP Nikki GB. So we've got all of that information there. So let's have a look and see what's happening with this flow. Let's see what's happening. So it's showing that it's actually running, and it's saying I've got a problem. So what is happening now? So this shows the process of what will happen. So we've created the item, so it will show that the SharePoint, and it will show that the team name is being added to your list. So we've seen that. And this is the guest list. This is where I said we could have an error coming up. We see this warning, we want it to continue. So what we've said is it's come out as a 404. So that step will error. So if you see that, don't worry, that is an acceptable step. So we've seen it's a 404. So when we look at the switch, it's 404, so that's case number 3. We've set the variable to false. So when we then look at the condition, is it a true or false condition? Then we're saying, well, actually the team doesn't exist. It's not going to go down that route. It's going to get my list members from my group. It's going to add them all. So there's 2 members of the group. They're going to add them to the string variable. So here's my 2 members get added. Then what will happen is then you go through the approval process, which we saw, and it will come out with an outcome there. You check to see whether it's approved or not. If it's approved, which it was, we create a team. We've got that information there. The team is created. Then we update the item in the SharePoint list with the new team ID and also the approval outcomes and notes and any other information you want. We put a delay in it. We check which label was selected. On here, I can't remember which label it was. It wasn't that one. It's this one. So we've said this is the label that we're going to use internal. Then we add the sensitivity label through to the group, and then we add the members to the team. So that's the requester as an owner of the team. Then we add the second owner as a member of the team, and the flow owner in this situation was supposed to be a member of the team. So that's kind of how the process will run, and so the team will get created. So got a team here. No, I've slightly gone over. Apologies for that. For whatever reason, it hasn't worked, but you can see a couple here on the bottom. If I zoom in a little bit here, is that you can see how they would come up. So that was my formatting. You can add it as you like. So yeah, apologies for going through a little bit longer. So it's quite a lot to get through in an hour. If I go back through to my presentation just to finish off, just to say that I showed you that we're using a form. Now you could use Power Apps or something like this. I create my data in a list, so I've got a record of all of those teams creations, so I can go back and look at kind of life cycle management. I'm then using Power Automate processes. So please scan the code here. That will take you through to my blog post that gives you the step-by-step details of how to sort that out.
That is great. Thanks so much, Nikki. We did get some questions in there, so we'll just ask them if you don't mind.
Yeah,
if anyone else has a question, type it in there. We might have time for just 1 or 2. So a question came in: is there a limit to how many variables you can use?
No, not as far as I'm aware. So just pull in the information that you want. So, you know, I've created it quite basic. So if you want to capture more information about that, about the department, you might want to capture a second owner and a third owner. There might be other things that you can capture. The main thing is replicate whatever you're collecting on the form needs to be then added to that list. Some of the information is used to create the team, but a lot of that information you can have your whole life cycle management.
Okay, thank you. Do I need a premium license for Power Automate?
No, so this is one of the questions people ask. Often if you use the HTTP connector, there's one that's just an HTTP connector, and that is a premium. But because we were using the HTTP connector to either a SharePoint or to that Office 365 group, it's not shown as premium. So this can all be done if you've just got your standard Office 365 licensing.
Perfect. Thanks, Nikki. That's all the questions we have. Thanks again for joining us today. It was a great presentation.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me today.
Thanks again, and thanks everybody for joining us. I guess that's the end of the presentation. We will be recording this and it will be added to the resource centre, and I'll let you know when it's available. Thanks again, take care and goodbye. Bye, Nikki.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.